guys changed up the microphones on me here. So used to the other way. All right, we'll go ahead and call the Basin Management Committee meeting to order. Can we please rise and have the pledge? Rob, we're going to do it all today. So.
Yeah. All right. With me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rob. So can we go ahead and have a roll call vote, or pardon me, not a roll call vote.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be functioning as clerk today for the meeting.
Jeez.
So Director Zimmer.
Here.
Director Garfinkel.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
And Chairperson Olhilsky.
Present.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I believe we start with board member comments when you're ready, sir.
Correct. So let's start with the Director Zimmer.
I have no comments at this time. I think we're going to address some of them in the items of the agenda.
I have a comment. We said when we passed the resolution that we were going to televise these meetings, we also said that we would revisit it in December. And I've looked for the meetings on the internet, and I haven't found them, so maybe it's my problem. But it's curious whether we are getting any feedback at all from people who might be listening to this on their either the C-SPAN channel or going on the internet and finding it. If we can somehow get a little feedback on that, we can make an intelligent decision next month.
Thank you.
I got nothing associates.
Okay. I think the only update I have is that just a comment I had is the Morro Bay National Estuary Program. We had our executive committee meeting last week, I believe, and we did have a little discussion about your climate PowerPoint presentation, so that was very, very appreciated by that group. And then I think you'll cover that later about how they're cooperating with us on the climate study. But I just did want to bring that up, that the estuary program is actively involved with us, so we'll talk more in detail about that. And they did appreciate, again, your presentation. Okay, so with that then, we'll go to approval of the meeting minutes from July 27th. Any questions, comments?
I'll make a motion. We approve.
Oh, you got to have public comment. Okay, so we'll go to public comment on the minutes. Thank you. Oh, hi, Lindy.
Lindy Owen, Los Osos. I wanted to say that the minutes are really without, I would have to agree, AGP doesn't seem to be putting up the meetings, so I had a couple questions about comments in the minutes, but I can't review them without having access to the AGP film or audio, so I really can't comment on it. I don't know anybody who can. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindy.
Richard Margetson, just for clarification, additional clarification, the meeting also is playing on Channel 20.
Okay.
And I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who have seen it on Channel 20. I don't know about the internet and where it is online and C-SPAN, but I know it's playing on Channel 20 on a regular daily basis, and there has been feedback from that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing no other comments, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as submitted.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments? Very, very detailed set of minutes from my perspective, so I thought that it did include everything. So I want to thank Rob for the detail he went into in the minutes. Okay, I don't think we need a roll call vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 5B, which is approval of warrants, budget update, and invoice register through 2016.
Did you take comment on consent in general? I'll move approval of that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think that those two items were intended for consent, but we can certainly take them separately. They're quick items.
I was taking them separately.
That's fine.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a staff report on that?
Sure. The staff note includes a budget update, and we do think we're going to be under budget this year, particularly with the amount we have not spent yet on the funding vote process, and I'll be talking a little bit about that in my executive director's report. But other than that, we've been keeping up to date, and things are as expected.
Okay. Any questions? Any public comment on that? Yep, Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Edwards, and very briefly on 5B, I wanted to note that the great majority of all these expenses have gone to reports and studies and analyses, not one pipe in the ground. And we've been at this a year, and my hope and my plea to this group is that we make next year the year of pipes and not paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, close public comments. Bring it back to the committee for a
I
motion.
move approval of 5B.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Again, we'll just take all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Well, I guess there's no opposed, so I don't need it. Item number 6, then, the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to take some time on each item here, if you'll bear with me. I know there's a little bit of feedback there, if we can trim that down just a little bit. So first, talking about funding and financing as it relates, particularly with Prop 1, we have been in the pre-application stage of Prop 1, and I think the state's done a nice job creating a process where you provide an initial summary of the projects, and then the state helps to fine-tune the approach of each applicant, so you don't end up shotgunning a bunch of programs for which you are unlikely to rank well. So we did receive initial feedback from the state about 2 weeks ago that they were carefully reviewing the basin plan programs to decide whether we belonged in the grant track or in the loan track. And of course, we were clear as to which one we want to be in. In order to qualify under some of their groundwater cleanup programs, there were specific criteria that they wanted us to meet on the grant track. And those included not just taking our currently intruded portion of the aquifer and moving east just to avoid contaminants and find new supplies. That didn't hit the mark for what they were looking for being grant worthy. They wanted to see that we also were embarking on an effort to push seawater back out, and those nuances weren't clear to them in the pre-app, so we wrote a follow-up memo, pulled the relevant sections of the basin plan to make it clear. Our goals were to take that front and move it back out. We showed them where we predicted the line would be after the programs are in place and how our metrics are sensitive to that westerly edge. So after explaining all that, they're still in review. I think we're very close to getting back on that grant track. So I should have an update. They wanted to provide an answer for today. They knew we were having this meeting but couldn't quite get there at the supervisory level. I think I've got the staff person marching in the right direction. So state's been responsive, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we can remain on that track. The one thing that we might want to consider is some of our upper aquifer efforts, because they're focused in on things like contamination cleanup. We've mentioned those as got honorable mention in the pre-application, but we can further indicate that we do have a new nitrate facility coming into town under Golden State's watch, and that might be something we can use in our full application to pursue, again, more of a cleanup approach. And we'll talk a little bit about project status later on in the agenda, but wanted to let you know where the state was going. Of course, we'll continue to pursue other opportunities as well as Prop 1, but Prop 1 is the primary goal at this point. The zone of benefit analysis, as we mentioned last time, based on feedback from the committee and what we're seeing really countywide, pursuing a funding vote right now that focuses only on administrative costs we saw as probably not being good timing relative to what we've seen elsewhere. And so the parties at the staff level are looking hard at next year's budget and finding creative ways to fund the county's portion of the hard costs, the administrative costs. So we'll have more at the next meeting on that. A follow-up on the creek discharge matter, we also got a formal answer back from the Division of Drinking Water on creek discharge. Not a big surprise here. If you recall from the last meeting, it could have gone two directions. One is that they would categorize it only as a normal MPDS wastewater effluent discharge, not a recharge project. And in that case, some of the stringent treatment and studies would not be required. It would just be another way of managing the effluent and have a little more flexibility, but perhaps with less grant opportunities. And then the other way was that if it was to be categorized as a replenishment project, a recharge project, we'd have to walk through the more formal steps to look at travel time, impact of downstream wells, the amount of water that would be mixing with the effluent naturally to get the carbon levels down in the water, and any augmentation to treatment that would be required. So the state reviewed all the studies and determined that, based on what they're doing statewide, that they would consider us to be a groundwater recharge and replenishment project. And that we're now working on outlining some of the next steps for the committee. I don't have those today because we just got this determination. But looking at what the scope of the work might be and the cost and the schedule to do the tracer study to determine next downstream wells and the travel time formally, to determine how much we can recapture and prove that in the tracer, and then what level of mixing would occur with the natural condition to minimize any augmentation of treatment. A lot of technical mumbo-jumbo, I apologize. But suffice it to say, we're going to look at the next steps and the scope of those steps and then bring those back. But the state did get back to us with that determination. You can stop me as we go, sure.
Thank you. I was planning on it. Yeah. Just as a follow-up, in your oral report that you just gave, as well as in the staff report, you talk about coming back at a future meeting. I mean, that's kind of generic. So are we talking about a couple of months, 3-4 months? What kind of time frame? Just ballpark us. I'd just like to have an idea for the future what kind of time frame you think we're talking about.
I think that's good. January. I think it's likely, based on what's on our agenda, that will be our next meeting, would be in January, that we might skip December and meet in January, and that would be the appropriate time to bring that back.
Yeah.
Bill, do you have a question too? Oh,
well,
everybody had a question.
Just a comment that, I think Golden State at least would support starting that process as soon as possible and keep moving on that. I think it's important to understand that and find out if that's the direction we're going to go in, because it's such a big project.
Agreed.
You said it in the written up of your report that you sent to us. You said that they were looking for reduced chlorides in the wells. I think that measurements in the wells. Is that possible to do in any near term?
Not necessarily near term. Our chloride metric is based on, for instance, the Resina well on the west side. Right. That well has a double weight in that metric. So during periods of time where that seawater front recedes, yes, we will see reduction in chlorides in that well.
We would. Okay.
And if we establish the front where the figure in the basin plan, I can pull the figure, chapter 7, I think it is, that figure shows that front pushed back out to the west near the urban fringe. And we'll be able to sample Rosina and other westerly wells and see a drop in chlorides compared to what we have today.
Okay. And then I had one other comment or question. Maybe it should have been during our general thing, but for discharge. I heard today that there's a problem with the county, the wastewater project, getting a permit to discharge the fluid onto the driving range, golf course. And that's why they haven't hooked that in yet. And I guess I would like to hear more about that and understand, because I thought that was a big part of the wastewater project plan, that they would use it. The connection is there. I know they put that in. I didn't connect it, but I know where the stub is.
Right.
And I'd like to know, maybe from the county, why or what they're facing as far as permitting.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't cover that, but Mark or somebody from the county can certainly hop up and help me out here, but I believe it relates to the timing of the salt and nutrient management plan, that, and I'll look for a nod of the head there, but that going beyond some of the urban reuse that's already programmed, they need that plan to be completed before they can do application of recycled water to ag and to the golf course. So I'll look for any. Okay, I think I hit that one right. Okay, so you did see an outline of that plan at your last meeting, and that will come back forward. County didn't have it ready for this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I move on?
Okay, we'll go back to you, Rob.
Great.
Next item.
Thank you. A quick update on the annual report. It is published to the BMC website and was filed with the court on about the 13th of October, so feel free to download that and keep that in your archive. I did include sort of a carbon copy of last month's update on the basin boundary modification. My apologies for that. I probably should have just taken that out, but that will go quiet here for a period of time. County can certainly chime in on this, but the next opportunity for boundary modification will be out in 2018. And so at this point, the county is looking to meet with and manage and take next steps on the fringe areas in the basin that aren't within our plan area.
Then maybe on that same subject, since you brought it up, I guess I would like to know from the rest of the board how important we think it is to have the boundary as we had it in the basin management plan. Are we willing to spend money to go further, to do evidence on where that boundary is? Because a while back we are given, some of us attended a presentation by Rosemary Knight from Stanford University, who has come up with a very ingenious and method of physically seeing what's underground for about 100,000 feet, I think it goes down to. And it's been so successful that I just read recently they're using that on Yellowstone to map the piping under the national park, Yellowstone National Park, with a helicopter running the loop. And so if we felt it was very important that we determine that boundary, I think that would be a very relatively inexpensive way to really prove that there is a boundary along the western edge where we believe it is.
So, through the chair, if I might, since this committee last met, the county did organize an outreach meeting to the folks who live in that part. With no disrespect, we call them living in the fringe areas. We remain convinced that that part of the DWR Bulletin 118 basin has nothing to do with managing the adjudicated part of the basin. But with the denial of the boundary request, we realize that what we have to do between now and 2018 is a few studies to document that, in fact, our assertion is true. And so we have explained that to the folks. We got pretty good turnout. I didn't stay till the bitter end of the meeting, but staff who were there assures me that everybody understands the situation, that I think at a fairly minimally intrusive way we'll be able to conduct those studies, and we'll see what they show. But the hope is that, yes, indeed, it shows no communication of the fringe areas to the adjudicated part of the basin. And so in 2018, with better documentation, we'll go back to DWR. So I would say yes, it's jurisdictionally important, makes life a whole lot simpler if this is the only entity in our interaction with the court. But should we have to go forward, with appropriate GSA formation, I think we have a vision of how we do that. And unless something changes dramatically, I think our view is that there's very little management to be done out in those parts. So I don't think it's going to complicate our work particularly, but yes, it would be nice not to have to worry about those other areas.
And I think I would agree with Committee Member Gibson. I think it is important that we take our best shot at it, for lack of a better term. Just because I think that it's important to be able to get this as defined and refined and as accurate as possible. I know sitting on LAFCO, we've gone through this on a number of other basins, so just using that as background information, I really do think that we just have to make our best effort at it. And if we can, we can't. If we can't, then, like Bruce said, that we'll have to deal with it in other fashions. So hope that answers your question.
Great.
Yeah, I concur with that also, and especially if the county has a plan already in place, let's move forward with that, and we'll see what the outcome is. I think we all are in agreement that we'd like for that to not be included in our basin.
Okay, good information.
Thank you. We're getting close here. A quick update on the Los Osos wastewater project. We appreciate the county providing what's of interest to everybody as we're connecting right now. We've got about 60% of the way through the connections, as you see there, and flows are averaging, as of last week, about 300,000 gallons per day. So flows are still fairly low. Everyone's trying to forecast that magic number when we stop connecting, where we'll end up, but maybe it's 500,000 to 600,000. We'll see, but connections are ongoing. We did mention that the county is still going through some of the verification process for Title 22, but that we do hope they'll be ready for next season in terms of delivering urban recycled water. Development criteria. Sorry.
Wait, no, I'm sure there's questions on this one, Mark.
So is the entire amount of the effluent, the 300,000 gallons per day, is that what's going out to Broderson right now? So, or is it going into a holding pond first, and you're slowly implementing it?
Well, I know there's water in the holding ponds, and I'm not sure, exactly what the split of the flow is, but they have been testing Broderson, and it's performing as they expect it to do.
And then the timing for Title 22, to that determination, do we know when we will receive confirmation that it's meeting the requirements?
And unless Mr. Hutchinson has any more detailed, the short answer is I'm not sure. Does it? Mark, do we have a timeline on getting the final certification? We don't. But as I say, you have the indication that by the next irrigation system, after a very rich rain season that we're about to go through, we should be fine. So,
Optimistic.
Predicted first here.
Yeah, you heard it first here.
All right.
Well, I did have another question. Repurposing, that's been obviously an important item. And are we still running at that 22% for repurposing, or does anybody know where we are on
Last
that?
I heard, we were still in the mid-20s.
25, yeah.
Because, again, that's really, really an important thing. And as I said last time when I got my hookup done, the contractor was just clueless about repurposing. So hopefully we're getting that word out.
Indeed. And we do have an agenda item that talks a little bit about that and some ideas in case for folks who didn't repurpose.
Right.
how
Yeah,
they
I
may
saw
be able
that.
to
Yeah,
benefit.
that's future, or not future, but later on in the agenda. I
Yeah.
did see that. And okay, thank you.
And my last item, Mr. Chair, is, actually two items. So development criteria for the Los Osos Community Plan. The Chair mentioned this earlier, but after the climate change discussion that you had done, Director Garfinkel, the National Estuary Program, folks were very interested in the outcome of some additional analysis in that vein, and so they were able to directly fund that analysis. We really appreciate that. And so Cleve Harris is working on that now. We hope to present that in January based on my last discussion with them. And so we'll bring back that discussion of those various items. However, we did put on today's agenda a discussion of build-out projections of water production, which will be an interesting discussion.
Again, just in that context, I'd like to thank the estuary program for working together with us on this. I thought that again, it's really, really a nice thing for them to do.
It is, and normally I'm used to chasing grants, not grants calling me up and saying, do you want this done? So that was great. I want more of that. And then did want to mention that, again, at the next meeting, which will probably be in January, we do expect to have the full results of the October monitoring event. We're just starting to get that data flowing in now, still assembling water level data and that sort of thing. So I didn't want to go too far into that, but I'm beginning to get eyes on how those are coming out. So that completes my executive director's report.
I'm going to jump back just to the community plan. I know one of our objectives is to provide a response from the BMC on the plan. And do we have a date? Is there a date that we have in line for that, or any time commitments that we have?
We know that's going to Planning Commission in April. So if we are going to provide substantive input early in the year, would be recommended.
And then are there going to be additional studies that are going to be taking place before we provide our input? Do we have any other studies lined up?
I think the one that's happening right now with respect to climate is probably the only formal study. Beyond that, it really is looking at the different factors and providing input.
Okay.
And we have the county planner working on that here to observe what we say, not only as formal input, but just as general input. So I know Carrie's here somewhere.
Carrie's in the back, yeah.
I just can't see where. We came in at the same time, so I know she's here.
All right. And then I had one question on our first topic, the basin plan implementation. And we talked about the nitrate removal system, the pre-application process. Is it still, can we still provide a pre-application, or how would that work if we did look at it closer of having a community nitrate removal system? And have we missed any deadlines for that to make that happen?
We did have some upper aquifer elements in our pre-app from Program A.
So we should be okay there?
And I haven't mentioned it in my memoranda, so it might be a little bit of a shift for the state, but I think we're in time.
Okay, good. And then if that's the case, we always talk about it being shovel-ready. What does that actually mean to be shovel-ready? How far along do we have to have an actual plan that we present to them in place, or something of that nature? I just didn't know exactly the details of shovel-ready.
That's a very good question, and you do see some variety of answers there. In my mind, and I know there's others, I know Renee's here, she's very good at grants as well, but having somewhere around a 30% design at least with your environmental documentation and your coastal development permit ready is generally called shovel-ready. Under Prop 84, they were requiring some of these projects to be fully designed with stamped plans and specs.
Wow.
That's what we had done for our district nitrate removal facility, is scrambled to put those together and got the money. But usually shovel-ready is around 30% with permits.
Okay. And then could that be a phased project, or does it have to be the full? If we did look at this and looked at it more of a community nitrate removal, could we go after grant funding and have it be completed in phases, or is that something that would wipe us off the table?
No, I think phases are, as long as there's benefit. They're looking for measured benefits for each completed grant. Okay. So if each phase provides a benefit, then I think it's doable.
Sounds good.
If I can just follow up on a comment that you made about Renee being grant, I probably should introduce Renee so everybody knows who you're talking about. Renee Osborne is our new general manager for the Los Osos CST. She's in the audience, and she did do a number of grant proposals, especially one for recycled water up in San Simeon. So I just wanted to put that in context so people knew who you were talking about
Sounds
there.
good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anything else, or we'll go to public comment?
No, thank you.
Okay, public comment on the executive director's report.
My name is Keith Weimer, homeowner and member of the Los Osos Sustainability Group. If I understand it right, then I guess the Proposition 1 application will include a number of projects, and if that's the case, could we look at one of the recommendations from the Sierra Club and the Sustainability Group, which is to use some of the runoff that is going to the estuary and so on as a means possibly of improving recycled water. The NEP may be interested in that. Secondly, just to comment on the creek discharge. I wanted to remind you that our recommendation regarding that is to go that direction only if you can verify beyond a doubt with tracers and so on that it will substantially increase the volume of that of those wells and so on, especially the new wells that are supposed to be put in that area. So this seems to basically support what we're talking about. Whatever studies are done, we really request that you look at the quantity of water that would be available for those wells. And that's the only way that we think that this is going to be a worthwhile project. Otherwise, you're wasting recycled water unless you can verify that it's going to the place you want. I'd also like you to reevaluate the value of that and the cost of it, because we are talking about much lower levels of recycled water now with the volume of the that's going through the wastewater project. The question is it worth it? And let's see, regarding basin boundary modification, I really don't see how not obtaining that verification would impact your management of this basin that much. So I don't understand why the cost should be, we should continue with the investment there. And let's see, shifting down to the community plan, it looks as though, and I want to thank Mr. Garfinkel for bringing up the climate impacts on our basin yield and so on, but does that mean then that there will be a climate metric added to this, the recommendation, the matrix, and so on? And finally, on the seawater intrusion monitoring, I hope that you also, in the discussions of that monitoring, look at overall water levels of the basin and the storage capacity of the basin. I think that should stay an indicator of the health of the basin. And we still need to answer the fundamental question of whether reduced pumping along the coast is all that it's going to take to stop seawater intrusion, or whether we have to bring up water levels in general.
Thank you. Could you maybe get the warning set up, or do you know how to do that? I'm sorry. We'll do the best we can if we can give you a little advance warning, but if not...
That did it at the last minute.
Yeah. Okay, Lindy. Oh, wait, we're going to do a little technical work here.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, 30 seconds. Thank you.
Typically, they're a minute.
You get a 1 minute warning.
There you go.
Long sum up.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, Lindy.
Lindy Owen, I wanted to thank you, Rob. It's a good update. The one question I still haven't heard the answer to, and you were going to try to get it, was how many years at current use, under current drought conditions, how many years do we have left of water supply in our lower basin? And if you could also know the answer to the upper basin, even if it's somewhat polluted, I'd like to... I think that's where we need to begin with. I don't know how you can talk about saving a basin if you don't even know how much is really what we're looking at. And then with the community plan, I wanted to bring up something that we saw at LOCAC Land Use, and it was the situation that the county is now issuing building permits or remodel permits, adding bedrooms, which are basically adding water use. The Coastal Commission permit approvals were based on no additional water use. So I think that's something we need to address because the permits are coming. It's now becoming very popular for people to rush in and get these permits because I do think that it's going to be ruled as taking water out of our basin that we can't give out yet until we know that this basin plan is going to have good results for future development. So each bedroom is an additional 50 gallons a day potential, or a little more if people are being careful. So I think those are the two things. I also, I know we'll talk about it later, but the idea of the recycled water, I think we're still trying to find out if that is going to be approved on a statewide basis for home deliveries versus going into, limited places where it can go. And I'm curious if we have any new farms signed on for getting some of that water at 60%, and you said we're doing about 300,000 gallons a day. I'm just curious if we're actually going to get up to, 500,000? Sounds about right. And then also, could you comment on, I heard that one of the pumpers that was emptying septic tanks actually illegally dumped into the sewer line again. Out of curiosity, I'd like to know, because that is very frustrating to find out that some of that is happening still. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards. And through the chair, I'd like to thank Mr. Miller for his executive director's report again. I think it's critically match the projects under the Basin Plan with possible funding sources. And I'm going to take the Program C projects, which fundamentally include 2 new wells in the central zone and some additional transmission facilities, the total cost of which is about $6.5 million. I think that's the Program C projects. I believe we ought to focus on self-funding those, because as Mr. Miller pointed out, it's going to take more selling. It's going to be a harder sell to get grant funding for that type of those projects. And in contrast, I think some of the Program B projects or the ion exchange units, those might more appropriately or more adequately qualify for available grant funding or loans, low-interest loans. Also, you mentioned the creek discharge. As a groundwater recharge and replenishment project, I think that fits perfectly with some of the Prop 1 funding opportunities. So, again, it's my hope that we don't spend a lot of money studying or attempting to make a case for something that doesn't fit real well, again, Program C wells in the grant funding arena, and that we really try to mix and match the projects with the funding so that it's most efficient. With regard to the creek discharge, I think that is a project worthy of moving forward. And in my view, given the creek's connection to zones D and E, which that is the lower basin, subject to the continued threat of seawater intrusion, that to me should be a priority discharge location on a par or even perhaps higher than Broderson. The annual report, I think that we're probably already starting to prepare next year's, the 2017 annual report. Hopefully it's going to be a lot cheaper this time around. I did want to ask about the basin boundary modification. I'm a little confused. We spent a lot of money defining our basin as it is. The state wants to recognize a basin that's larger than that. I'm not sure which direction it's going or who's doing what. All I hope is that this committee and this entity does not spend any more time or money in that connection. So again, I'd like an answer to that, or appreciate an answer. That's my hope, is that this committee is not spending or involving itself in that determination. I think that's the county's purview. And then I'll close by saying thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comments and bring it back. So, back and
Just
no.
very brief comments, Mr. Chair, if I
If
might.
you want to respond briefly.
To Keith, I know we are looking at sources of urban runoff for reducing overall salt loading, so that's something the NEP is interested in. More on that as that develops. As far as climate metrics, we'll be bringing that back for discussion at this committee level in January. And then for Lindy, I haven't forgot about this idea of how many years of remaining supply, both in upper and lower. We're not quite there, ready to present that yet, but haven't forgotten. And then I would leave the county if they want to respond to illegal dumping or current arrangements with the farming community. I'm not aware of the details there. And then if we are going to be budgeting anything for basin boundary modifications, we would bring that back for discussion here before we did that.
Okay. So let's move on. Let's move on to item 7A then, the update on the status of the basin plan infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following the theme of pipes instead of paper, I thought it was important to include this particular agenda item. Of course, we have the basin plan goal not just of studying and monitoring the basin, but of accomplishing physical infrastructure projects. And I wanted to provide what I think is a helpful update, since there is quite a bit of activity over the last 6 months on those various fronts. And so I'll point you to your chart in the staff report. I have a few updates in that, but I'll try to be descriptive for those of you in the audience. But under Basin Plan Program A, we've got quite a bit of progress. We finally did get the water system interconnection project between Golden State and the district out to bid. Estimate was $100,000, came out at $104,000, so looks like we're within the range there. And that will be going to our board for consideration in the December meeting and hopefully award. So John Madonna Construction was the apparent low bidder on that project. And if awarded, it should be completed by spring of 2017. It's not a big project. And that will take us into the current century with respect to moving water between the two largest purveyors. The Upper Aquifer Well at 8th Street in El Moro is a CSD project. And we did award the drilling phase of that project to North Star Drilling. And they're about to begin sometime in early December. And so I'm hoping that in the January meeting of this committee that I'll have a little bit of data to share in terms of what we found at that well. Primary things of interest are chrome-6 and nitrate as to whether that well is sufficient for blending without further treatment, which is what we are hoping. And then we'll follow by equipping that well, if it's a good well, with completion anticipated by third quarter of next year. The South Bay well nitrate removal project has been completed, as well as the Palisades well modification. Golden State has a blending project at Skyline, which they have completed in terms of the pipeline. That project has been updated somewhat into sort of a combined Program A, Program B project, in that they're now looking to implement nitrate removal so they can fully utilize their Skyline well to its maximum capacity, which is around 100 acre-feet per year. And they're actually well within working on that through working drawings. They're going through some permit discussions with the county, but hoping to get that out to formal bid in spring of 2017 and complete it by the third quarter of next year. So that project, which may be grant-worthy, is moving forward as well. Grab me if I missed something, Mark. Water meters at S&T, it's been done, talked about many times. Expansion well number 1 under Program C, the Los Olivos well that was recently drilled by Golden State Water Company. I indicated that it was completed, and as a quick update to that, it has been drilled, but it's currently in the process of being equipped. Put the pump in and all the controls, and that should be fully operational in the first quarter of 2017, in time for next spring. The further expansion wells under Program C, wells number 2 and 3, we are in a property acquisition phase, looking very actively at 2 sites, which the district is discussing under closed session, which is appropriate, and both appear to be quite viable, good quality, and we're looking to get into those environmental studies as soon as we can to look at clearing those sites and completing the property acquisition phase of those projects. Again, trying to get to a shovel-ready or as close to it as we can. And then S&T and Golden State Water Company interconnection, which then would fully intertie all 3 water purveyors, is still at the conceptual stage at this point, looking for that future funding opportunity. Bill, you can elucidate that as you would see fit, and that completes my update of infrastructure.
Thank you. Any?
No, I have no comment. Good overview. The only thing really is just on the format. Maybe if we could include all of the projects, just so we could keep those in front of us and look at what the projects in Program D are out there, and that way it just gives us a snapshot. If we're going to be, I like the format. I like the way it's the updates and the status, and I think we should continue providing these updates on a at our meetings, and then if we had all the projects, we could look at those in front of us.
Like that.
Anything else? Okay, we'll go to.
Let me just comment. I heard Mr. Dimmer talk about in the previous item, something to do with community denitrification, and just indicate my interest as well. I talked a bit to Rob about the cost benefit of denitrifying upper aquifer well as a possible very timely way in which to take pressure off the lower aquifer. And I think that deserves a little more study if economies of scale are available that says to increase the denitrification process as a means of enhancing the effect of balancing the basin. I think that's worth looking into.
Yeah, great. And then if we could capitalize on grant funding for that, I think that would be even better. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to public comment on item 7A.
Keith Weimer. Just a couple of quick comments. The upper aquifer well at 8th Street, it could also be subject to seawater intrusion. I just wanted to remind you that the water levels in the upper aquifer have gone down over the last 10 years or so that's one to be monitoring. It's another reason for a metric for the upper aquifer. That would probably be one of the wells, I would imagine, and or the 3rd Street well. Regarding the parts of Program C that aren't done, I understand that Golden State and CSD will have 1 well each, and that number 1 and 2 and 3. And it sounds as though, based on Jeff's remarks, that we're talking about a not too much money. I mean, $6 million or so. So I think that is within the range, as Jeff said, of self-funding or whatever. But I also think it wouldn't be too difficult, especially with some minimal grant funds, to make that part of an assessment, especially if you have if you can determine that conservation recycled water use is providing a general benefit, and people paying for those in the wastewater project get some kind of relief, whatever percentage that is, then you're only talking about a pretty small assessment there. And I say that in the context of the interconnection. I'm wondering whether that can be pared down and whether the conservation levels that we're looking at require that same amount of interconnection that was contemplated. So anyway, it might be a quick way to getting some funding and getting those things installed. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comments. Bring it back to Any further comment? Okay, we'll move to 7B, Rob.
7B is a review of future water demand projections for the Los Osos Community Plan. Always interesting to put numbers out in front of this community with respect to future conditions. So we took a risk in doing that as staff and be happy to present those to you today. We did two things as part of this discussion. One is to look at future population, and the other is to look at future per capita production. And I thought I would go through a little discussion of each one. Future population really falls within the jurisdiction and the good work of county planning. We've got Carrie Brown here who can help me out if I stumble on this, but they're looking at the developable pieces of property throughout the community within the urban reserve line, and also at the changes in household density that have been evident over the last number of years, census to census. And so we thought it most appropriate to put a range of numbers on this, and we've done that in our chart here, and I'll report out on these numbers with totals that take us from a current population of about 14,200, rounded up, to somewhere between 17,000 and 18,750. Sorry for the wide range, but depending on what assumptions you make, you do get a range that's wide, that is that wide. Density alone per household makes a big difference. So I think the interesting thing is that the basin plan contemplated a higher number than that. And so we're already, just in terms of the number of persons that may be in the total community, are down pretty significantly from what we were looking at just a number of years ago as the basin plan was being drafted. So population has a downward trend, and as properties are preserved because of environmentally sensitive habitat and projects that perhaps could be subdivided but weren't, that number could have further downward pressure on it. The other question is one of, okay, we have another 3,000 to 4,000 people plus or minus coming into town at a build-out condition. Now, how much water will be produced in order to support those folks? So we did try to back out the population associated with the private domestic well owners and just focused on the purveyor service areas because that's where we have the best data. And so we've done that in the chart. And not a perfect science here, and please forgive the fine decimal points that I've used. I don't want to imply that the level of accuracy is that high, but it makes it easier to make sure there is no math errors. So we looked at current water production per capita. Now I say production because that includes non-revenue water, or what we used to call unaccounted for water. It includes commercial and irrigation supplies, includes everything that's gone into the purveyors providing water in 2015, where among the three purveyors we provided just over 1,000 acre-feet. So when you divide that into current population, you get a per capita number that's around 67 gallons per capita. What that means is that if you back out commercial and everything else, people are using very little water, very close to that 50 gallons total, indoor and outdoor. And so Los Osos is doing a great job of reducing its water demand. When we projected that out into the future, we thought it would be absolutely necessary to put a range on that as well. And what I did is looked at what if through conservation measures and continued retrofits, we were able to reduce that number by 10%. Perhaps we can do better than that, particularly in drought conditions, and I think we can, but I wanted to be a little conservative. And then if we have a relaxation of our drought condition and there's some rebound in the amount of water people use, even with further retrofits, I increased that number by 10%. So I put it all on paper. If folks want to question those assumptions, this is the right forum to do that. But what we come up with is a range of estimates for build-out production somewhere in the 1140 to just under 1,500 acre-feet per year. And so when you go back to the basin plan, which assumed 19,800 people and a future production value for the purveyors of a little over 2,000, we weren't even on the chart that was projecting that out into the future in the basin plan. So with the good measures that have been implemented and the actual conditions here in Los Osos, it does appear that build-out will be using less water than what we had previously predicted. So the important part of that is that as the community plan goes forward, having those numbers match current projections and reality seem to be quite important. So that's why it was before you here today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll go to public comment on item 7B.
Keith Weimer again. I'm always a little amazed by making, the fact that building projections are made in our water situation here, and I just want to emphasize and hope that the decision makers ahead will not look at these projected building numbers and say, well, that's what we have to get to, or that means we can do that, because obviously it's going to be controlled by the water use or the sustainability of the basin and the water availability. And regarding that, when it comes to assumptions about how much water will be used now and in the future, I do want to caution, and you have this in your note down here, that the people with private well use, the domestic use within the basin, and even private well use for farms and so on, is actually not going to be managed to any appreciable degree. So that leaves a big unknown. And I know in the basin plan, the domestic private well use was shown to be about 3 or 4 times what the average use was, among properties within purveyor areas. So I just wanted to make that clarification, that unless we do have a way to manage that water basin-wide, then it's really hard to make predictions on what will be managed. One last comment is that to say that we are way under projections, and then to also consider that some of the projections, once we get all the infrastructure programs in place, are somewhere out there that will be much, that will allow, with some margin of safety even, this, is still based on speculation. What we need to be, if I'm being clear there, what we need to remember is that we still have to have concrete evidence or conclusive evidence that the basin is sustainable before there's building. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Edwards. I think this calculation is the single most important thing we can do. We have to understand the future demand so that we can scale our water resource projects. And in doing so, we can come to the proper cost and figure out the funding. I mean, again, I think this is critical. Not only is it critical to the implementation of the basin management plan, but it also relates to the community plan that the county is working on, which will ultimately be considered and reviewed and approved by the California Coastal Commission. So it all has to tie together. You've heard that the basin management plan called for 2 times, virtually 2 times what we're actually anticipating the water demand to be on full build-out. So, then right now the community plan provides for 18,750, I think, approximately, population. And there's a habitat conservation plan in preparation right now, as most folks know. And in that plan, it's going to call for additional open space dedications, to further that mitigation of the impacts to the snail. And any projects that we see developed, subdivisions or what have you, are also going to be asked to provide open space dedications. My point is there's going to be less land overall to develop. And that's what's going to help drive the total population numbers down. Rob has used, at the low end, 16,330 people. And I think that's a realistic expectation. Rounded up to 17,000, and at 60 gallons per capita per day, that equates to 139 acre-feet. Total build-out, 139 acre-feet per year. That also coincidentally equates to about a 15% conservation reduction. So, as I've suggested before, over the next 25 or 30 years, as build-out is realized, we have ample opportunity to conserve an equal amount of water. Combined with implementation of programs A and C and to some extent B, I think we've got a real chance at balancing the basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindy?
Lindy, I always urge for just caution because we don't know how long the drought's going on. I guess I would like to know if there was talk about a 2-year, if the water maintains and we're actually increasing it, how long would it be before we would allow the new growth? I think that's really important to have this working before we just start issuing permits. Again, paper permits, paper water has proven to cause some pretty serious damage. Today's paper talked about Lake Cachuma at 7%. Santa Ynez, Santa Barbara, Montecito, they're not going to get water. What do we look at as a model to say, let's not get to that point before we actually take lots of caution. So, we're talking about 550 new homes would be about the 2,000 plus additional people that you think can be on this basin. So, again, I just urge caution. And I am very upset about private wells. Again, you can't have a matrix, you can't have a basin plan if you don't know how much water they get to use and use every day. The expansion, you see farms expanding. I see a farmer out doing grass-fed beef out of the basin, which may not be attached, or it may be at this point. So anyway, I think as we look at the new growth and the community plan, we do really need to have some annual. I don't think anything should be approved. I would like to see the bedroom additions being addressed now, because that is going against the Coastal Commission's approval of the wastewater plant. Because we have a sewer, people now are adding bedrooms, so that it also is coming back to impact what we sit here and do with this basin management. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Do you have any comments, Rob?
Only to thank the public for their very helpful thoughts. We will be bringing those criteria for growth back at a subsequent meeting, the January meeting. So you're going to expect to hear more on that. I think at this point, if there are any committee comments, otherwise staff will make sure that county planning has a copy of this memorandum and continue the dialogue as they prepare the community plan.
I just have one quick question. So this was prepared for the Los Osos community plan, but we were looking at the development standards, the redevelopment standards, and the matrix. Will this be incorporated into that aspect also?
The two are certainly related in that they both are key inputs into the community plan. The matrix that we had brought forward, which we're now working on the climate aspects of it, it was really a start line. Where is that start line? Where this is more of a finish line. So the two are certainly related and come together in the community plan, but they can be considered independently somewhat.
Okay. All right. That brings us up to 7C. And for the record, I'd like to indicate that we did get a 4-page letter from the Sustainability Group, which I think you distributed to the board members. So I want to thank everybody, or thank that group for that input, because I thought it was very detailed and productive. So,
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an update of the water conservation program that you've heard a number of times here. Starting last April, we presented a series of measures, both indoor and outdoor, that we felt could maximize conservation within the basin to a reasonable degree and offer some incentives and rebates to the community to accomplish that, and at a fairly cost-effective dollar per acre foot benefit. And so we discussed that in detail in previous meetings, and we were looking for potential funding sources through the wastewater project. And at the last meeting, we said that one of the steps, regardless of the funding source, that we really need to go through, whether we're to be able to attach to some of the DWR grant funds or whatever funding source, is to take the programs that we were discussing here and put them in the format of an addendum to the already approved water conservation implementation plan. And so that's what we've done here with this. And so we are asking for some concrete input, if not actual endorsement here today from the committee. And I'll walk through some of the key elements, though we did discuss them at previous meetings. Staff is looking at 4 indoor measures and 4 outdoor measures, all of which would be available for some level of rebate. The indoor measures include hot water recirculation systems, high-efficiency clothes washers, the replacement of even the 1.6 gallon per flush toilets, which have been going in since the early 90s with some of the higher-end toilets, and then going for the 2 gallon a minute shower heads with the 1.5 gallon a minute replacement. So 4 indoor projects, and I'll talk about the rebate amounts. And then 4 outdoor projects which are intended to reduce irrigation demand throughout the basin. A couple of notes about funding. Again, this is a first and important step to pursuing some funding either through the wastewater project or through other means. Once this is endorsed by this committee, we'd hand it over to County Public Works, and they can share it with Coastal Commission staff and make sure that the elements that we're considering here would be in substantial conformance with previous commission approvals. And after getting that formal nod, then this would be ready to be forwarded either on to DWR or for the consideration of other funds. In previous meetings, the National Estuary Program staff heard our discussion of these measures and did indicate that there may be some limited funding in the range of $5,000 to $9,000 available as a small kickstart, almost pilot scale, but I think could be very helpful in that we could do some initial projects, take copious photographs, a couple testimonials, and spark people's interest in what could be possible in the use of these potential rebate funds. And I also have received a number of inquiries from friends and family asking about availability of rebates here as they seek to repurpose their septic tanks. So going through some of the specifics, and I'll do this verbally so the folks in the audience can hear the rebate amounts. And this is also posted on our website if you want to download this at slowcountywater.org, lower right-hand corner. For the hot water recirculation system, we were looking at a draft rebate amount of $300 per project. Wouldn't necessarily cover the whole cost of the recirculator, but would be a substantial incentive. High-efficiency clothes washer, we look to increase the available rebate to $250 in the hopes of getting that process kick-started. In replacing the 1.6 gallon per flush toilets, we were going to stay with the historical county rebate of $250, and then to replace the 2 gallon a minute shower heads with $1.5, $40. Looking at the outdoor programs, much of the focus was on the repurposing of existing septic tanks And we've changed that a little bit, I think improved it from the previous version. I'll talk about what we've done. We're proposing a $500 rebate. You don't get a rebate for each thing that you do with respect to repurposing, but each repurposed septic tank would be eligible for a $500 rebate, and it can be repurposed for roof water only. It could be repurposed for folks who want to haul recycled water to that tank and use it when that element is available in the community, or it could be repurposed for the storage and the distribution of gray water, but only one rebate per repurposed tank. One of the things that we noticed is that for the folks who, either due to advice they received from their contractor or perhaps lack of familiarity, chose not to repurpose their tank and now are experiencing some buyer's remorse, we do want to note that there are some cost-effective above-ground storage systems that can substantially reduce your outdoor use. And so we're proposing that if folks are willing to implement at least 500 gallons of equivalent storage, that they also be eligible for a rebate. And that would be something that you could do even if you chose not to repurpose your septic system. You're just going to have footprint for that above-ground tank, which you don't necessarily need for a buried septic tank. And then we did include a laundry to landscape program where you could have a direct connection. The code allows some ease of installation compared to a full gray water system when it comes to laundry, and we proposed a $50 rebate for that outdoor program. So 8 programs, and depending on the level of community-wide acceptance and implementation, we think there are substantial water savings available here. I've heard estimates, and I've borne some of these out personally, that with 2,000 or 3,000 gallons of total storage on a property, you can virtually eliminate outdoor water use here for a non-turf planting pallet. And in many areas of Los Osos, because of the sandy soil, we have these dry spells, these hot spells in between rain events. Very recently we experienced that, where your tank would be full and you'd be ready to irrigate for a month or two after that one rain event when there's a dry, hot spell after the rain. That happened last winter quite a bit. So we think this would be, I think, a prudent program to pursue. We'd recommend that the committee endorse it here today. I did receive a very helpful letter of numbered comments from the sustainability group. I've gone over those in some detail. I guess I would say that staff is open to the committee, including any of these elements. We didn't have time to do that and time to publish the addendum. But if you did want to take action today, feel free to just direct us with respect to which number you want us to include within their comments, and we can do that in the final version before we provide it to the county. Or, of course, we could retool this and bring it back at a subsequent meeting. So those are some of your options, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Bill?
I think I agree with all the indoor rebate schedule that you put there. I think the research, $300, you believe that's a low figure. I don't think it's low. I put in my research system for less than $200, so but I could go along with the $300. I have a little problem though on the outdoor or specific outdoor programs. One is for a rebate, just saying you're going to repurpose your tank, do you get a $500 check, or do you actually have to show proof that you are using that water? Because I've seen most people who have repurposed their septic tank or got the permit, there's no access at all to that septic tank. So the only, like my own, the only place it can go is to the leach field, that's what I wanted, and that's connected to my roof runoff, and that's fine. It cost me very little just to do that. So the $500, I think you would really have to go to do that. They'd have to show that they're actually using that water, and not just taking it, because everyone would like to have a little relief from having to put in our laterals. The other thing, of course, it's not on yours, but I was thinking that really we're talking about landscape and all the water in landscape, and there ought to be a incentive to go xeriscape rather than repurpose septic tanks and do things just no water forever. And that's possible, or very little water. We have several gardens, including my own, which gets no water usage. So I think that maybe it should be added to that, an incentive to go xeriscape, which would take away that whole landscape issue.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks. If I could follow up with Bill. I had sort of the same question about the septic tank repurposing, because simply putting roof water into septic tank doesn't change anything about the water balance, but I assume that meant having a pumping system that was part of that. I mean, it talks about storage capacity, but it's storage capacity plus the ability to get it out there. And I would think that once we make sure that that's clear, that, and we're not simply providing that a net cash payment, that if folks are going to go to the trouble of doing that, they're going to be using it. So yeah. I think that's reasonable. As to the xeriscape you brought up, I think that's not a bad idea, but I think the complexity of administering that program is another step above what we're prepared to deal with right now. So, I mean, I think that's something we could develop and add on at an appropriate time. But I think just in terms of the management of that, from checking to see that has happened, would be problematic. The other comment that I had was just back up on the high-efficiency clothes washers, and what jumped out at me was the cost of $5,000 an acre-foot saved. But I'm not sure that was there might be a calculation error there. Did I?
I checked that one. It's not great in terms of its economics.
It isn't, but you said the $250 rebate times 400 washers a year is $100,000, and if we're expecting to save 40 to 60 acre feet per year, and I don't know when you say the total of 5,000 an acre foot saved, but 50 acre feet a year divided into $100,000 would be $2,000 per acre foot saved at that point. But I think the other thing about all of these numbers, and just to be sure that we understand it, is this capital improvement saves that whatever acre feet a year it saves times the useful life of the improvement. And so we may want to go back and just make sure that all those are apples to apples on the cost, because I think that all of these are fairly expensive per acre feet. If it really does calculate out at 5,000 acre feet a year saved, I think we have to think carefully as to whether that is appropriate, and do we really expect we're going to in fact get those savings.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a comment regarding the funding of the grant, and where is that coming from? We are applying for that right now? Is that what's happening, or how do we have that $400,000?
Thank you. We don't have it yet. As far as funding on this, one potential source would be the DWR grant dollars that were in the wastewater project. In order to do that, though, we need to go through the step of having the implementation plan amended through coastal before we can request that possibility from DWR. So not secure at this point.
And if I could add on to that, staff's looked at that, trying to get at some of that money within the DWR funds within the wastewater project, and the administrative complexity and the requirements of actually mobilizing those dollars are challenging to the point of being potentially infeasible. But I'm working with staff on some other options to provide funding out of the flood control district, and when those are developed, we can bring those forward. But in any case, we're looking to make sure that coastal does approve this amendment, and then I think the timing of that will work out well in the sense of having some funding at least to get this thing started.
Right.
All right, so you have something to add?
Yeah,
Ron?
maybe just before we let the public talk, in terms of some of the questions that came up, I do think having a verification process will be important, and in the actual guidelines for the rebate, we certainly would want to include that if you just cleaned and closed your tank, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for folks who have invested now in a pump system that provides access and a clear means of using that water. I think that was a very good comment.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think another thing we could do is look at a public committee or some type of participation where maybe a board member or alternate or something like that participates with them to help have oversight on those projects as they're implemented. I've heard numerous comments about the public and willingness to participate, and that could be somewhere where I think it would benefit us to have them, and also the public could have this committee could have input on the projects and ensuring they're completed to our specs.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's good.
You might also consider that to take advantage of the estuaries programs, volunteering to give us, and use that money not for rebates, but for the education and for showing people exactly how they do it, and kind of following what was just said as to get a community group together that could march forward and make this happen, make people understand. Because in actuality, without all these rebates, the usage per household has dropped dramatically all over our community. And so people are going to do the right thing. Rebates are nice, but they still are going to do the right thing.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, then we'll go to public comment on item 7C.
My name is Keith Weimer, LOSO Sustainability Group. I appreciate the nice comments about our comments. And I first wanted just to thank you for continuing to recognize the vital importance of conservation, both indoor and outdoor, to the sustainability of the basin. And I wanted to thank Rob for doing a lot of the work on this. Appreciate that. We provided 15 recommendations in all, with the goal of maximizing the benefits of the program, consistent with the permit and so on, and without adding any significant cost, is what we were trying to do. We hope that you got it soon enough so that you're able to make some decisions today, so there won't be a delay, but we're willing to work on it some more, as we have volunteered before, if you need us to give further input. I'll go over a few recommendations. I'll try to leave some time for questions. Number 2, I'm going to start off with that. The addendum measures should have time-specific 1 to 2 year targets for full implementation. This is doable with full funding and consistent with the objective of the wastewater project. Those targets will probably be, or may be at least, required by the Coastal Commission. I'm sorry, does everybody have a copy of this? Because I do have some extras, if you'd like to look at it. Okay. So number 3, the addendum should stress the critical need for strong outreach. So I'm reinforcing what Mr. Garfinkel said. And there is an outreach and education program that's part of the original Water Conservation Implementation Plan, and we suggest that be implemented. There are several components that were not implemented, including surveys. And I think what Mr. Zimmer brought up, that it may be possible to have public participation in getting out some of this information door to door, and that would be very helpful. It can be done at a low cost. Number 6, outdoor measures 1 and 2, the repurposing and rainwater tank measures should provide an incentive for rainwater systems that are larger, So we recommend $500 rebates for 1,000 or more gallon systems and $400 rebates for 500 to 1,000 gallon systems, because the goal is to hopefully not use potable water use for outdoors. Number 7 and 8, we recommend the gray water rebates are not limited only to systems that treat and store the water. Gravity flow systems are much more cost effective. However, the $500 rebate is still needed to cover permits and installation costs, which we're talking about plumbing costs, so things can get kind of expensive. In 9, we recommend adding rebates for low water use landscaping, similar to the Zeroscape. In 12, that had to be too fast. In 12, we suggest adding 1.28 gallon to flush toilets to increase participation. In 14, we recommend money remaining in the grant fund goes immediately to outreach, especially to encourage people to repurpose septic tanks. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Edwards. We know that there's at least 200 acre-feet per year that could be conserved beyond where we are right now. There are over 5,000 1.6 gallon per flush toilets out there right now. Up to 7,000 2.5 gallons per minute shower heads. The state of the art for those respectively are less than 1 gallon per flush for toilets and 1 gallon per minute for shower heads. That's low-hanging fruit. Yet, it will cost up to $2 million to fund that, in my estimation. The money you're talking about providing for rebates is not very much money. Comparatively, it's maybe 20% of what's needed. I encourage the rebate program. It's been available for years now. In fact, if you go on Channel 20, you can see rebate offerings right now. The fact is the steam has run out of the program. To optimize conservation, we need both the rebate program and a private sector program like the one that's in place now under Title 19. Some very basic modifications could be made to that program to broaden its availability and eligibility. The two programs in combination can reach our conservation goals. On the second page of the staff report, it does suggest private funding as an option, again, in augmentation. The amendments to Title 19 can include both indoor and outdoor. The boundary can be coterminous with our current basin plan boundary. So my request to you is please direct, as a group, county staff to prepare an authorization to the Board of Supervisors to amend Title 19. The breadth of amendments would be subject to open discussion. A lot of good ideas can come out of that, but fundamentally, it's going to broaden the conservation plan for both indoor and outdoor and to a broad range of people and allow the private sector to in part drive and pay for the conservation that we need to realize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, if I could just interject with my apologies. I have a commitment up the road, so I will ask my alternate, Mr. Hutchinson, to join you, and look forward to seeing you at the next opportunity.
Thank you,
Mr. Miller, for his work.
I think the record will show that alternate Mr. Hutchinson is stepping in at this point. Thank you, Mark. Okay, we'll go back to public comment.
Patrick McGibney with the Sustainability Group, and I'd like to thank Rob for putting this conservation plan together, and please correct me if any of my following comments are erroneous or is misinformation. I'd also like to thank the BMC for continuing to recognize the importance of conservation to the basin and also for recognizing that full implementation of the Los Osos Water Project Conservation Program is required by the project's permit. Keith went over some of our recommendations, but I want to focus on something he didn't mention, that the county should fully fund this program now without further cost to the people paying for the Los Osos wastewater project. The wastewater project conservation program is supposed to be paid for with project funds. The coastal development permit required the county to commit $5 million to, quote, help basin residents reduce their potable water use as much as possible, end of quote. The Water Conservation Implementation Plan, with this draft addendum as well as with our comments and recommendations, does that fully if funded now, although it should be reviewed and improved periodically to make sure that it's meeting its goals. The county got $3.4 million grant, which required it to put up a $400,000 match. So it had $300.8 million in the fund to pay for the program. It simply needs to make good on its commitment to fund the program right away without the project costing us more. Why did the Coastal Commission require this conservation program? First, to provide the greatest possible mitigation for potential adverse impacts. The wastewater project and basin plan infrastructure programs, especially in combination with the worst drought on recorded history, can have serious negative impacts on seawater intrusion. And the conservation program is the most effective way to avoid these impacts. Secondly, to enhance the value of the project, reducing nitrates a few milligrams per liter over 30 years is a small benefit, if it happens. But conservation enhancement of the project, and by having to do so is as much as possible to stop seawater intrusion, will help save our basin. So we thank you for coordinating with the county to make the wastewater project conservation program the best program possible, and ask you to send it forward with our recommendations, including that the county fund it fully and immediately. And I'd also like to just mention on a side note that I did also a hot water recirculation pump, and it cost me $750 through solar ponics. So how you did it for $200 or less was pretty incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Chuck Cecina. I'm speaking as a private citizen of Los Osos and a member of the Sustainability Group. I guess first I'd like to say that we're still in a time of uncertainty. Nothing has gone as planned, as evidenced by the fact that we're 60% hooked up and only got 300,000 gallons of water coming through the plant. None of our projections seem to be working out the way we kind of thought they would. And that is quite a big deal because it affects the possibility of creek recharge and everything else. I mean, we're even going to have water to put into the creek. I think that we should proceed with those studies because if it turns out that that is the most valuable way to recharge, we've got to know that. But I just find it very interesting that no projections are coming anywhere close to what we thought we were going to have. The fact that the Sustainability Group has pushed for this amendment for several years makes it really hard to take that 60% of the community is already hooked up and we're still discussing a way to rebate septic tank repurposing. I mean, we have been pushing this for years. Move it to outdoors, not just indoors. I'm glad the NEP is recognizing the gravity of the situation and jumping in to help. I find it funny that we could self-certify toilet retrofits but not septic retrofits, but I do want to make sure that it's not just people who are sealing. You should be reusing to get that rebate. The conservation should be funded through the wastewater project, as the county committed the $5 million to do this. That lets the purveyors fund the capital improvement projects for the basin plan. The county committed $5 million toward water conservation. I understand that cost overruns, such as the recent Electrocraft contract that's been awarded to redo all of the electrical work in the lift stations because of faulty design, that taps into the conservation funding because that's soft money, that if you don't spend it, oh well, if the Coastal Commission doesn't force you to spend it, you saved it, except that that doesn't really help our water basin. The county needs to find funding for the full $5 million water conservation program. And I urge you to support the Los Osos Sustainability Group comments regarding the amendments to the Water Conservation Implementation Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Lindy?
Well, I'm scattered. I've got paper everywhere. I wanted to read off again in the minutes from last meeting. Mr. Miller commented on the Water Conservation Program update that the first spending source for the wastewater project, $5 million, was from the United States Department of Agriculture. Unfortunately, those funds have been spent, so they cannot be used for conservation programs. Maybe Mark Hutchinson can explain what you spent it on, because on record it shows that there's $2.4 million still collecting spider webs there in the funds that we are being charged for, so they should come back to us, and it's extremely important that they be used for the conservation efforts that we need. And then on this one, funding consideration, which was out of this November 7th memo, it says the Morro Bay National Estuary Program, again, with the DWR funding, we might have $400,000 available. And I did the math for 5,000 homes. It looks like $80 a home is available. So that's, again, I'm not sure where the money is. And looking at a lot of the savings that might happen, I had comments to say that currently rain events don't happen for about 8 or 9 months out of the year. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. So when we repurpose tanks to store rainwater, I've already used all the rainwater that I collected. I don't have my tank yet, but I have almost the equivalent in garbage cans that I run around putting out. And I've already used it up. I'm going to have to take drinking supply and water my garden a little bit more to try to make it through Saturday. So again, that's why I asked if we couldn't really get serious about having water trucked to these tanks in our homes. Whether you have the outdoor tank, a 550-gallon tank is $500. It's not that bad. They do take up some room, and they're not very pretty. But that and a septic tank and a one-time delivery, what would that cost? And how much are we saving if we're using that for outdoors? I can use that to wash my car. I don't want to use rainwater to wash my car after it's gotten skanky and sat there for a long time. It is putrid stuff, and the first rains are really dirty. So those are some of my comments. I think that some of these numbers are odd, because when I look at the one for the washing machine rebate, you say that we can save, the rebate cost is $2,600 per acre feet. So I don't know. I'm not sure these probably all need to be looked at, but I do support the repurposing of the septic tanks, but I think it needs to be made clear that they do take pumps to get the water out, or you're going to break the bottom so that you can actually go back into the ground, or you can't go into the leach field once you go past the little bevel. So that doesn't work. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindy. Mr. Best?
I wasn't planning to speak, but I have some just off-the-cuff comments. It still brings me to this point that we are still pretty unorganized here in this town. We're still pretty fragmented with the red team and the blue team, between what's going on with the CSD and the county and LOCAC, and we're not making any progress. I'm concerned about that. We've been talking about a lot of things for the past year or more. And what I hear from a lot of people is they don't know what they don't know a lot of things about how to repurpose their tanks. They don't know how to, what's going to be going on in the future. We don't, Los Osos needs to be making earning some revenue to be able to grow, and we're not taking advantage of the ability for reclaimed water. Lindy's comments about the fact that we can be tanking water to individual homes is a fantastic opportunity for Los Osos to be making revenue, as well as being able to reuse that water. We need to find, I haven't really seen really clear. I've been trying to go to your website and try to find out what's been going on, and I'm not really getting a clear picture. So I needed to find out ways of how I can get better educated as to, so as a member of the community, as to what is being done right and what's not being, there's not being enough done to get the right answers for our town. I'm not really clear that how putting water into the creek at one part of Los Osos is going to satisfy the problem with water intrusion. There's so many variables here that I really am questioning some of these answers, and I'm not finding them on your website. So we need to be more transparent. We need to have more information, and we need to be getting the community better educated and finding ways of solving our problems faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back. I don't know if you want to respond to any of the questions or comments, but I would like to have some detailed discussion, particularly about the sustainability group recommendations.
Let's do it. I think you heard a lot of comments, general comments there, as opposed to specific question. There were, I think, helpful discussion, and it may be helpful to go through the sustainability group recommendations that you're unsure about or want to talk more about prior to any action.
All right. And I don't want to monopolize things, even though I'm the chair, but I do think that what I would like to do is just, if we look at the sustainability group letter, basically items 5 through 12 are the items that talk about the rebate amounts and those things. So some of them I think make sense, like combining certain things together. And so, I mean, maybe if we could just for context run through these starting at 5 through
Sure.
12 and just see if we have a consensus or any feeling about how these should work. Some of them are relatively simple. I think it's 12 talks about the toilet rebate should be for the dual flush and the 1.2. So, I mean, that's something that I think we already have in there. But could we just maybe run through 5 through 12?
Sure, I can walk us through that if you'd like. So item 5 in their recommendations basically combines the septic tank and the basically measures 1 and 2 that are outdoor into a single item because they're so similar. They do basically the same thing, and I think that's, from staff's perspective, that's fine. It's a simplification. Item 6, and stop me if you want to talk about these individually as I go down the list.
No, I think item 5, I think it does simplify it if we do combine those together. So.
Easy to do. Item 6 looks at a slight adjustment of the rebate amount so that you get $500 if you have at least 1,000 gallons of storage, and that amount drops to $400 if you're within the 500 to 1,000 gallon system. So to incentivize people to go for the higher storage. And staff doesn't have a problem with that if that's where the committee wants to go with that.
Yeah, in that regard, though, I thought that the comments that came up previously about making sure that it's just not a tank, that it's actually being used, is something that I think we need to look at including in that rebate. So, and I think Mr. Cecina brought up last time that he went to Ace Hardware and he was able to buy the pump for, and I'm going off probably bad memory, $80 or something like that. But I think we have to make sure it's not just a tank, but they actually do have the physical ability to use that water.
Yeah, agreed, and we can include that in the amendment. Item 7, so it'd be a broadening of the gray water program to allow for gravity programs that don't have to utilize a store and pump system, knowing that gray water is quite expensive to implement in existing conditions. Staff doesn't have a particular problem with that.
Yeah, I thought the comment in here, though, about the slab foundations, I don't know that we need to do a survey for how many slab foundations we are, but I think that is a factor that does weigh into how much of this will actually be expended.
Agreed. On item 8, increasing the laundry to landscape rebate from $50 to $100, the committee would like to do that. That's fine. $50 was a bit arbitrary with respect to how much it would take to incentivize folks. And then item 9 sort of goes to Bill Garfinkel's or Director Garfinkel's comment about xeriscaping. That was a proposal for a variable rebate for low water use landscaping. And so we didn't prepare anything detailed for that, but that would be a new measure that's not currently on the list. Item 10, $500 cap on rebates for outdoor measures, but they would like the $100 rebate for laundry to landscape to be outside of that, so that multiple measures could be used. Let me make sure I got that correct. So they would like to reconsider that cap in the future if it's discovered that a significant portion are not taking advantage of outdoor measures after learning other options. And for indoor measures, they're proposing a raising of that hot water recirc amount from $300 to $350. And then toilet rebates to include the 1.28 gallon per flush toilets and dual flush toilets. And then, and those were all the, right. And then the rest of them dealt with the funding aspects of the program.
I mean, I can, the only one that I really have an issue with, quite frankly, I think number 10 is something that we have to look at in more detail, and we just can't do in the short term. I think that upping the recirc to 350 makes a lot of sense to me. And I think number 7 is something that I don't know how we can deal with that in the short term. But the other items, like combining them together, I'm not sure the $50 or $100 rebate for the laundry is, I mean, it doesn't cost that much, quite frankly. It depends, I guess, where your laundry is located. Mine was located on the outside wall, and I just ran a pipe through the wall. It wasn't that big of a deal.
That's a big issue. Many properties, the laundry is internal, and that's the same slab issue that you talked about. If you're on a slab, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah. So anyway, so now that we've run through those, how do we want to proceed?
So, Mr. Chair, are you proposing to do 5, 6, and 7? And then, which goes through the gray water system, and then 11, 12, and 13, which hits the hot water recirculators, the toilets. Well, no, 11 and 12.
Right.
Sorry.
Those are the ones that I think that we should.
5, 6, and 7, and 11 and 12.
At this point, yes,
Okay.
I believe.
If you're prepared to do that and want to take action on this today to endorse it, staff can include those adjustments in the final plan before we submit it.
Well, I definitely would like to take action today. So I think, 12 is, I mean, that's nothing. 11 is just increasing it for the recirc. And I have to say that when I had a plumbing company come out and look at my recirc, I was on the upper end of that too. So maybe I need to talk to you to see who did your work.
I don't understand that. I would like to put number 9, though, in it. I think number 9 has the biggest potential for saving water.
The question is, I think the question with that one is, how do we implement that? Because it takes some monitoring. So I guess that's the only concern I have with
you
that.
award it after they do the landscaping.
Staff could certainly bring that back if you want to see detail on that.
I mean, my concern would be, Bill, is somebody does it, but then the day after they get the money, they rip it out.
Well, they're going to spend a lot more than the money's worth if they do that.
Well, I mean, we're in discussion now.
Right, no, I agree with you, but I mean, a drive-by would pretty much show, I do it in our neighborhood all the time, who's taking it seriously and doing something about it, and who's not. You can just see by their planning, whether they've changed turf to stone, whether they've taken out high-usage water, flowering, things like that, and put in succulents and things like that. So it's pretty easy to visually get a feeling whether they're going to do a low-impact LID landscape or a xeriscape.
The state, Mr. Chair, if I might, under SaveOurWater.org, when they had the lawn removal program, had you take before and after photos along with a list of planting materials. So I did that for my property, worked out okay. So that is a possibility if the committee wanted to.
I guess the question I would have, and I'm not disagreeing with the concept, but if we're going to say it's a variable rebate between 1 and 4, how do we set the criteria for?
And I agree with that part, yeah. It needs to be more specific than that.
Right. Okay.
So I think that just justifies more of an ad hoc type committee to oversee that. I know the turf removal programs that we had, there was a application phase. You received approval for that through pictures, and then when you were done, you followed up with pictures, and then you received a rebate after that. So I think implementing those types of measures to ensure the projects get completed, and then having a committee that's willing to do that for us, I think would be extremely beneficial. I think we should try to move on these measures and get this moving. The rebate amounts, I'm okay with the changes, and the biggest thing that I've really seen in some of the other areas that we're doing rebate programs in is the lack of participation, and is that because of the dollar amount or the outreach? Not sure what the reason is. So I would hate to limit or de-incentivize somebody by $50 or $100 or something of that nature. I think ensuring that we have the right numbers out there, but most importantly, engaging in the community, I think is the biggest, going to be a most beneficial way to implement these programs.
Well, let me ask a question. Could we go ahead and implement these with somehow indicating the low-impact landscape? But again, I don't know how we deal with the number at this point. So how?
We could implement the measures as suggested and bring that forward to the Coastal Commission. Think a little bit about other xeriscaping programs that have been done statewide. There's some good examples out there, and bring that back and have it be either a future addendum or a program that is funded in a different manner, so we can put some more legs on that. If you like, we can do that.
Or could we, I guess this has to go to Coastal Commission, so it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
I did. That's off the record. I'm just wondering if there's a way, can we just, for purposes of moving this forward, just say a low-impact landscape rebate of up to $400 would be available, and then worry about the details at a later date?
Sure, and we can fill in some of those xeriscaping, a documentation process to verify that.
Because we have to do that on the tanks anyway. We have to put in some wording how to verify that one too.
Yeah,
if you want to include that in a more generic fashion today, we'll flesh out some details.
I'd like to see up to $400, and then I think that makes sense.
I do.
Great. So that would be item
9.
Rob, have you bid on the state program for turf removal. Is that still active? I've heard at one point that went away.
It did go away. It came back.
So it's back now.
It's been about a month since I've checked it. Last time I checked, it was still active.
Okay.
Last time I checked, it was still active, too. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess if we're in concurrence on those, the question would be the 50 or the 100 on the landscape to lawn, or not, pardon me, landscape to lawn, laundry, pardon me.
Yeah.
The laundry amount would be the one question out there. So, again, I think it's either something you can do and the 50 does it, or you can't do it and the 100 doesn't make any difference.
I agree with you.
So I just soon keep that at the 50.
Okay. So we've got 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12.
Yep. Well, 12, I think we already have. It just.
Yeah, well, we'll clarify to make sure it's clear.
Okay. Is there any more discussion? Can we have a motion then, please? What would you like the motion to say?
If you were to summarize this
I have
motion.
to ask, yes, would you summarize the motion
Yes.
so we can have it?
So it would be to approve staff's recommendation with the addition of comments 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12 within the Los Osos Sustainability Group comments. That would be the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. So we have a second?
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to interject for the BMC members. We are moving into a category of conservation measures that I think over time will either lose their effectiveness or require ongoing inputs of probably some kind of a grant program. And we need to be planning for that as we move into the future. For example, my washing machine breaks, and the old standard top loader that uses however many 100 gallons a load is cheap, and the front loader is expensive. I get a grant, I buy a front loader. 5 years down the road, that washer breaks. If there's no grant, I get a top loader. So we need to keep that in mind, that many of these programs are in that category. Using the rainwater systems is a great, great thing, but pumps that are outside pumping rainwater don't last forever, and the cheaper ones don't last long. And, money's limited for a lot of our folks out here, and if we don't have something to step in and keep it going, then these wonderful systems in 2 years, we start to see a percentage that are simply abandoned because of cost.
I think that's something in the long term in the relatively medium term we need to address. I think that's a valid point. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Did I hear the motion maker as Director Garfinkel and the second from Director Zimmer?
Correct. Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. I thought that was a very, very productive conversation. So that brings us to our last item, the public comment for items not on our agenda. And if you've already stated this 1 or 2 or 3 times, we can just say I've already said it once. I wasn't picking on you, Lindy.
I just wanted to, maybe Mark could talk about it, but Golden State just won the top conservation award for the entire state, I believe. And so his idea of getting a group together at the utilities meeting the other night, we also discussed how beneficial it would be for S&T, Golden State, and the CSD Water to sit down and work together to fund some of the conservation information, take turns doing booths at fairs. There's a lot we could do and many of us are willing to volunteer. We just don't really have the leadership or a format. But maybe you could help us put something together since you're award-winning. So sure. I appreciate that. And then I did have something else, but I'll leave it. I just want to say, once you have a front loader, you'll never go back. It uses half the electricity to dry your clothes, too. So they're expensive, but they're worth it.
Thank you, Lindy.
Patrick McGibney. I just wanted to make a clarification comment regarding the recorded, televised recordings that we do here. Is that when we're going to bring it back for review in December, it was because we wanted to make sure that by televising it, the community was either here. The question was going to be: is the community here? More community members making comments because they're more informed, or are they making comments because they want to be on television? It didn't have anything to do with the comments that you received for having this on here. So I think it's a really important thing that we're doing. I think the comments that you're getting from the community are very valid, and I think it's because there's more of an informed community. I'd like to ask just a couple questions, though, from the board and from Rob. If you could just answer these, it would be very nice. Did the 2010 CDP say that the county must commit $5 million to conservation? And then the next question is, did the county commit $5 million to conservation? Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Keith Weimer, Sustainability Group. First, I want to thank you for responding to our suggestions and implementing them. I really appreciate it. And there has been a lot of work that we've done on conservation, and so it's great to get this response, and we appreciate that. I'd like to say a few words about development. You can tell I'm getting in some licks here because I've missed the last few meetings. I may go a few seconds over, so I'll ask the chair's indulgence. I read or listened to the last two BMC meetings, and speakers made the case well for having solid evidence of basin sustainability before building is allowed. They made the point that water, as a bottom line, that the water level metric and the chloride metric targets as a bottom line must be achieved over a period of time. I still got the feeling that the BMC might lean towards approving a matrix that allows building based on inconclusive evidence, such as sustainable yield projections or Title 19. That would be a mistake. I heard a case being made for people who want to build, so I want to briefly make the case for property owners who live here. Many have most of their assets tied up in their homes with very few alternatives if the basin isn't sustainable. If a desal plant or imported water is needed, assuming these are even technically feasible, they will be expensive. Desal could cost as much as the wastewater project, and many people won't be able to shoulder the burden of the wastewater assessment, the upcoming basin assessment, and future water-related assessments and other costs. With high taxes and/or an uncertain water supply, people living here would lose the value in their homes and even the value of their investment in the wastewater project. A desal plant or imported water that replaces the basin makes the LOWWP a very bad investment. The vital importance of a sustainable basin to protect our homes, the valuable habitat, and the investment in the wastewater project was not lost on the Coastal Commission. That's why Special Condition 6 requires conclusive evidence of basin sustainability prior to building, and why Condition 5 requires conservation and recycled water programs to maximize basin sustainability. By the way, by maximizing these programs as soon as possible, that is the fastest way to see conclusive evidence of a sustainable water supply. We're on that track now. I was glad to hear Supervisor Gibson say that Title 19 had run its course. With a good conservation program basin-wide, the only thing Title 19 does is harden demand at a higher level. In other words, if you find out seawater intrusion hasn't stopped after building is approved, it's too late. The best possible conservation, reuse, and infrastructure programs, with these programs, production could be brought down to the true sustainable yield Mr. Garfinkel suggests when he talks about a sustainable yield that accounts for climate change. We must do that now to see if the basin is sustainable for the current population before committing to more water use. This aligns with the priorities and goals of the wastewater project permit and the basin plan. One last point. I don't see how you can have conclusive evidence of a sustainable water supply without monitoring and managing private well use which amounts to 1/2 of the basin water supply, the water pumped. That water use went up in 2015, offsetting reductions made in the purveyor areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Jeff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Jeff Edwards, and I'd respectfully request your committee direct staff to bring back an agenda item for discussion that focuses specifically on Title 19 and possible amendments that may be made to that ordinance. The notion that it's run its course, yes, this generation has. We need a second generation Title 19 program. Through the chair, committee member Zimmer asked, why would people opt for one over rebates versus letting the private sector handle it through such a program? Number one, people don't have time to deal with it. They don't have an understanding of the issues. And lastly, they typically don't have the funds to advance for installation only to wait for a rebate. So, while the rebate program is helpful, there's no money there yet. You have no money. So why are we spending a whole bunch of time on a program that doesn't have any funding? Title 19 is self-funded. So again, I would respectfully request you bring that back as an agenda item for the next meeting to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. I don't know if you have any responses, Rob?
I didn't want to speak for the county on the coastal development permit, but certainly you heard some perspectives there, and staff would be happy to bring back whatever the board would direct us to bring back. If you want to have a more detailed discussion on Title 19, since you heard both sides there, we'd be happy to bring that back.
Well, my thought on that is this is similar to the community plan. I mean, it's not our plan, and Title 19 is not ours. It's the county. So we could provide potentially input into it, but, that's the most we can do.
That would be the context that we would talk about. It would be input. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, what's the board's pleasure? I appreciate both sides of that argument. So.
Yeah, I don't have a comment on it.
We'll leave it to the executive director.
No, I believe if we probably individually before the next meeting should go through and reread Title 19 to make sure we understand exactly what it says today, and then maybe bring that up as an issue whether we want to jump into that with recommendations to the county.
I think that's a good approach, just so we all have homework, and then we'll be prepared to see how and if we want to deal with it at our next meeting. I think that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to make a comment, because I didn't understand it enough I didn't want to make a recommendation on something I didn't understand well enough.
Okay, well, let's just put that as a potential future agenda item.
I can put it on my executive director's report as a placeholder, and then...
Right. Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Anything else? Okay. Oh, Lindy, did you have...
Could you address the idea of having a subcommittee to at least look at the...
Yeah, I appreciate. Thank you. So yes, congratulations on the award. So we did. We had our joint meeting, our second joint meeting of our utility advisory and our financial advisory committee on Monday, and one of the things that came up in that meeting that also came up in our previous meeting was coming up with an educational outreach program where we could go to like Rotary, Kiwanis, PTA, whatever the entity is, and then, to help educate and help inform people about what the situation is, because people hear seawater intrusion, they have no idea what that means. So, so if that's something that you're interested in working with me on in the short term here, then we can go ahead and figure out for our next meeting, bring up some approaches that we could take. And in the interim, I think it's some things that we can work on just to do without having to come back to the committee. Just do some outreach things that have worked for you guys. And since you're getting a pat on the back here, we assume that there are things that worked for you that we could implement here. So.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, then, we'll adjourn.
Great, thank you.
Next meeting will be, I believe, in January.
I think it's going to be the third week in January, but we'll send out a notice.
Okay. Thank you.
Shout out to Renee.
Yeah.